Hello and welcome to Dropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've been all the way to Nottingham today to see Journeyman.
Yes.
Journeyman.
Journeyman.
New film from Paddy Considine, written and directed by him. From my understanding, it's supposed to have a general release in the UK on March 30th, which was about a week ago.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't see it anywhere in Birmingham. It was recommended to me by one of our listeners, Bob. And so I went looking for it. The closest place was Nottingham, apparently. Someone else has said that it will be showing at the Electric Cinema at the end of this month, I think.
Right, okay.
But anyway, we buggered off to Nottingham because I just didn't want to miss it.
Yeah, and I want to say a word about the Broadway Cinema and, just say what a pleasure it was to visit there. It's a fantastic social space. It's got a bar, it's got a library. You can see how it's embedded in film history. They've got posters of film appreciation classes from the 1960s, seasons on Judy Garland, signed photographs of, Shirley MacLaine and everybody really. It's also connected to education, to film appreciation. They have a library, they can project all kinds of things. I also noticed that there were elderly ladies, who were at the cinema, and there's a lift for them to get them in and out. So, it's accessible to all kinds of people. And also it's embedded in the community. I noticed that the cinema that we saw Journeyman in was the Paul Smith Cinema, named after the Nottingham designer, I believe. So it was just a very, very pleasant environment to be in, very welcoming. The usher was wearing a 120 beats per minute t-shirt, and I said, I want one, and she said, well, kind of ask at the box office, and I was too shy to do so. But
it's way daft.
Well, I was too shy to do so, but I was very happy to see a kind of dialogue on cinema. They actually have one of those boards where people can post comments on what their feelings about what they'd seen, and you can see it. So it's kind of it's enmeshed in the cinematic culture of the place. It's clear that the intent is to disseminate a cinematic culture and to make people feel kind of welcome and in dialogue in doing so. And I was very, very impressed with the space.
I'm just tweeting at the Broadway Cinema asking for a t-shirt.
Oh.
Give us a second. My friend wants one of your 120
beats per minute t-shirts. Extra large.
T-shirt, but was too much of a chicken to ask.
Well, that is the truth. So,
any chance he could have one?
I'm happy to buy it.
Please. He says he will pay money, so you should ask for some.
Okay, come on, let's get back on topic.
Right, the film is about, here's the non-spoiler version of the film. The premise of the film is Paddy Considine is a world champion boxer. He's won this title by default because the boxer he was supposed to be facing pulled out because of an injury. So the title has gone to him. He kind of has to prove that he's actually worth it. So he takes on this fight with a much younger guy, a kind of live wire upstart sort of guy. He was very aggressive in the press conference. After the fight, he goes home and just sort of collapses. He has some sort of brain event, loses a lot of memory, loses a lot of brain function. You don't know what the details of the injury are. It's just some traumatic brain injury, but you see this big scar on his head where an operation's been done, and from then on he's slightly lobotomized, and he has to relearn how to walk and talk and all these relationships with people. He kind of turns into a bit of a toddler. I don't think that's being cruel. I think actually the film suggests it because he has a baby, and I think the toll that it takes on his wife it becomes, instead of a lover, she now has two kids to deal with in a way. I think the film is suggesting that.
Yes.
So the film then is about how his relationships fare, how they kind of break down and rebuilt, and how he rebuilds his life.
Yes.
Spoilers here on.
Yeah. It's a film about a boxer, and I'm very interested in boxing films because I think, as a genre, they're really about what it is to be a man and how to be a man, and kind of the problems with being a man whilst trying to achieve the American dream or success. And it's always kind of filled in with considerations of race and class and gender, so I find it's a very, very rich terrain, right, in which to work. This film doesn't kind of follow the genre formula, so to speak, right? So it actually kind of, begins at the beginning. He's very successful already. He's got this beautiful house, or, what passes for a beautiful house, the kind of house that you see in, like, that program where they go show you footballers' apartments, right? It's kind of...
Cribs.
Yeah.
It's a nice place. I mean, he's done well for himself.
Yeah, it's a nice place, but it kind of shows that it's new. It's not quite lived in. Yeah, it's empty of furniture, so the key thing really, it's sparsely furnished. It's a recent kind of purchase.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I guess he's recently become world champion, and that's his financial status has recently been elevated.
That's right. So the film kind of begins by showing this, and by showing, he's a very loving husband and father, and then he's got the fight. And actually, the aneurysm or whatever it is only happens to him once he arrives home. And then his friends drop him, really, or you get the feeling that his friends have dropped him.
They're very uncomfortable around him.
They're very uncomfortable around him. And then really the majority of the film is about him finding what he values most in life, which is really his wife and his daughter. That's really kind of, I would say, the narrative of the last half of the film, would you say?
I think it's the narrative of the entire film. This is actually saying that before I figured out this was going to be the whole film, it annoyed me at the start. Up until the fight, he's a very, very one-note character. It's all about his family. He's constantly looking at these photos of his wife and his child, and he loves them and he's kissing them, and a lot of care is taken to make sure that that he's devoted to his wife and his child. To actually the detriment of other things. One of the problems I have with the film is I don't believe him as a world-class boxer.
Well, exactly. I mean, I have many problems with the film. So I think the film is interesting to me because on the one hand, I think it's not a very good film. On the other hand, I found it deeply touching, right? So there were moments in it that really moved me, And the things that I found problems with are, first of all, you can't believe him as a boxer. He, as fit as Paddy Considine is for a man his age, he's got nowhere near the type of body that a boxer has.
Well, what I'm getting at is when it comes related to the family, because obviously... this is not to say that boxers are not devoted to their families.
Yes.
Of course they are. But he is sort of such a softie, really, that element of his character, that in his private life he is emotional and devoted, it kind of spills over to his professional life. So particularly I'm thinking of the press conference where the young lad's trying to spar with him, and obviously he's the kind of elder statesman, and it's probably going to be his last fight. And he's and there's this thing about how his dad has passed away. His dad was a bit of a figure in boxing, so everyone's kind of aware of that. And he gives him a sort of a bit of a tribute and says, I'm glad he got to see various things in my life, but he is not playing the part, and you think, like, do you not know what the game you're in is, right? So it's he's kind of too polite and too genteel and too charming, right? And just he's not playing the game of boxing.
He has no killer instinct that you see at that point,
right?
Yeah.
And so I don't believe him as a winner for that reason. Yeah. I think he could easily be a failed fighter who didn't have what it took.
Though I think it's interesting because later on in the film, that comes out.
His work ethic does, for sure. His willingness to fight, because what he talks about in that press conference is, my dad's no longer here, but I have a new baby. I've got someone new to protect in my life. and so there's this idea that his fighting is for his family to an extent, and then later on in the film, when his wife leaves because we'll get onto it, she can't take it, and she takes the daughter with her, then he's fighting for his family in a very different way. He's fighting to regain what he can of his previous self so that she returns and his family will be reunited.
Yes.
So ultimately, the family stuff at the start did make sense because that was what the entire thrust of the film was. But
Yes.
right at the start, it was very, very one note.
Well, the thing about it is that it kind of... I saw it as a television movie in a way, right? So it kind of makes sense structurally in terms of dialogue, and you could see how kind of like, you know, the images are nothing to speak of, really. The film feels thin visually, right? And what carries it is really the dialogue and the performances. And I think it does carry it. I did find it deeply affecting. But until you get into the groove of it, you think, oh my God, this is lacking. Kind of, you know, what are we looking at? There's nothing to look at, right? Like, you know, and you end up paying too much attention to things that should be more unconsciously absorbed. You know, you notice what he does, the gestures that he makes with his fingers. You notice his walk and, you know, how he's doing it and how his walk changes, like, through the course of the film. And really, you're doing that because really there's nothing else to look at in the film.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, his performance is kind of mannered, but I think it's very, very good. I think it's well observed. And the fact that it changes throughout the film and you can notice it, I think is a good thing. You see his improvement in his ability to control his motor function and that sort of thing, and the way his kind of his physical tics change and lessen, I think is really good performance.
It is, I agree.
But the fact that that is the centerpiece means you are picking up on it sort of so much that actually it becomes almost a distraction of itself.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting because you know after we saw the film, I looked him up on Wikipedia just to remind myself, and actually I have seen him in a lot more things than I thought I had.
Yeah.
Right, including on stage in The Journeyman. Sorry, the Ferryman is what I meant.
Right.
But one of the things that it mentioned is that he's got some kind of optical disorder.
Okay.
Right, that you know, that he cures through a kind of a colored lens, and I just thought, well, you know, how interesting. I wonder if that affects the filmmaking, because you know I was kind of stunned by how lacking the film was visually. So you know, when you think of boxing films, you think of very spectacular images, glistening bodies. I mean, think of what Scorsese does with Robert De Niro, you know, in all of those fights in Raging Bull, right? Or Body and Soul, or the Robert Wise one, what is The Setup, right? Like, they're kind of, you know, magnificent visually, and the genre lends itself to do such kind of interesting and complex and, you know, striking things visually. And there's none of that here. Absolutely none, right?
Earland syndrome, a condition in which the brain cannot adequately process visual stimuli. His condition has improved significantly since he began wearing purple Earland filters. So that's I had no idea.
I had no idea, and I don't even think I don't know if it explains anything. But it's just interesting that a film that feels so visually simple, really, or and thus lacking, you know, is made by someone who's got an optical disorder.
I must say, you haven't seen Tyrannosaur, have you?
No, I haven't.
His previous film, I think that was his first feature, which I've seen. It's a brilliant film, and I mean that's not a controversial opinion. People love that film, and I think it's a better film than this, and you will too when you watch it. And visually, it's not a whole lot more interesting, but it is more interesting. This is quite flat. It was on my mind slightly, Tyrannosaur, because there's a kind of central opposition between the two films, whereas Tyrannosaur is all about finding love and tenderness in a really brutal world and situation. And there's a part of this film where it's the absolute opposite. When he's first coming to terms, trying to cope with his situation, and he's being he kind of lashes out at his wife a couple of times, and it's incredibly shocking outbursts of violence that nobody's expecting. I mean, and I think it's shocking in the best way. I think it's warranted, and it generates the right sort of emotional response in you. I don't think it feels cheap or anything. But that's about kind of it's this beautiful world where everything's been going right. He's got this beautiful family. He's got this nice clean house that they barely even moved into. And brutality is making its way in now.
But this is a very loving film, and actually what I did love very much about it is that the accent is on men feeling, which I think is, it's not as unusual as I sometimes make it out to seem, but actually it is relatively unusual. Like, usually men do and women feel in cinema. Yeah, and so to have this really be about a man in love, and a man losing his love, and a man afraid of what he's lost, and a man who feels he can't recover it, and thus, and so the meaningfulness, the meaningfulness of his relationships and his family, to a man who cries for what he may have lost, is very moving.
Well, he's also reduced. Thinking about that crying, he's reduced to a mental state in which emotion is more foregrounded, I think, to him, and he expresses it more readily. Again, like a child does. I mean, that's really his state for a lot of the film. So he cries quite openly. I mean, this thing that I saw Michael Caine talking about how women will cry. This is talking about acting. Women will cry, and men will do anything but cry.
Yes.
But in this, Paddy Considine cries quite readily because he's not of a sort of state where he's trying to keep it in. Like he's his mental state is much more open. And it is very, very moving, particularly the phone call he has with his wife. He's been estranged from her for a little while now, and they slightly reconnect on the phone, and it's just, I miss you, I love you, and he's constantly trying to think of something else to say, which is a really touching thing that he says to himself, something else, because he's just trying to keep her on the phone.
Yes.
Beautiful.
It is.
Really, really touching.
I mean, actually, I think the writing in that is beautiful, and I think Paddy Considine's performance in that is beautiful.
It's great.
And I found it deeply, deeply moving. So that's kind of the contradictions in this film, because there are moments like that where it works, and it is kind of deeply touching. And I also want to mention Shorty Whitaker, because she is like, she's such a positive force. Every time she appears on screen, you feel a warmth. I don't know how to describe it, right? She's got this kind of very warm and accessible presence. You can see how she loves her, and you can see why she's the kind of anchor to his life that he knows her to be. So actually, I think both of those performances in their own way are fantastic, and they're fantastic together. And they're the reason to see the film, I think.
I think the film suffers when she leaves.
Yes.
Because she's in the film for a third half, and then she turns up again right at the end to reunite the family. For a long time, she's not in it, and this is when the film is on its emotional. I mean, it's at the doldrums when she leaves, but then it's a kind of emotional upswing when the friends get back involved, and they basically get back into a training routine to help him win her back, I suppose.
Yes.
But I think the film suffers for her not being there, and I think the film really actually lost me when it got into this friends coming back thing. That to me felt very easy.
Too easy.
Not an easy decision to make for the storytelling, but I mean it was executed in a way that seemed very easy.
Yes, I mean basically the friends have all dumped him. He's friendless, right? And you could see that the wife is feeling a kind of anger and resentment, basically, because you can also imagine in a boxer's career, these acolytes have probably coasted and benefited socially and financially and, in all kinds of ways from just being near this guy. And then as soon as something happens, they're nowhere to be seen, right? So actually the realms of anger and frustration and so on that you would expect to be there are really not there. I mean, you get a sense that they're slightly ashamed not to have seen him.
I think that's exactly what it is. I don't think that the film is saying that these guys are purely hangers-on who dump him as soon as he's no longer sort of useful to him. That's not what they're saying. They are his friends.
They are his friends.
But they don't know how to cope with this shift in him. There's that great scene where Jodie Whittaker bumps into one of them at the hairdressers, and Paddy Considine sat there in the car, and she basically says, like, why haven't you been here? Because she's his wife, she can't give him up, and she's been dealing with it with sort of dignity and love. And she's saying, well, why the fuck haven't you? And he is ashamed, and he knows he should be ashamed, and he says, can I go and say hi to him? And she's like, of course you fucking can.
Yeah.
Because it's that thing of like, oh, how can I speak to a disabled person that men seem to have? I think, I don't know if actually it's maybe particularly a men thing. I don't know, but it's the way that interaction was observed felt very honest to me and very authentic. It happened so quickly after that they come back together. That felt easy to me.
Well, it is easy, but nonetheless, I do think, to me, kind of, some of the writing was very fine. I thought, some of the performances, had moments that were just brilliant, particularly Considine, and particularly in that scene that you mentioned. So, the writing and the acting are very good. I think the filmmaking as a whole is really kindergarten filmmaking. It's just basically putting the actor on the frame. Nothing is being expressed through, lighting, angles, a camera movement, cutting, right? Like, really nothing. And the film has some almost like set pieces where you feel the lack, right? And the two main ones for me are the boxing scenes themselves and the suicide scene. I mean, that was pathetic.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
That should have been a moment, right? And it should have been a visual moment. And, you can see that basically he lacks the skills to kind of communicate it, kind of using the medium, really. So in that sense, I found the whole film disappointing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although I think those couple of moments of physical violence towards his wife that show up completely from out of nowhere and shock you.
Yes.
Are done well, and I think it's precisely because there's just no clue that's going to happen.
Yes.
And
though it's perfectly understandable when it does.
Yeah, right, exactly. But like, there's no kind of. But the filmmaking is not it's not ominous or anything like that. It's just showing you a scene quite plainly, and then, oh my god, it changes.
Well,
and the other thing is the baby going missing scene.
Yes, that was very tense.
Unbelievably tense and harrowing. And yes, there is filmmaking technique in there, right? It is editing. It's he's trying to watch TV, the baby's screaming louder and louder, he turns the TV up, and you also see him to cut the mum upstairs, hoovering, so she can't hear. So that is filmmaking technique, building that tension.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's revolutionary, but it is better than nothing. It's working.
I think, I see that as the writing. I see, it's written that way. It's then kind of filmed very basically. So let's agree that kind of those are wonderful scenes, and they're very tense. Right, and they really work. And as I said, I was deeply moved by several moments in the film, like really deeply, actually. It's really touching and affecting, But in the context of this, I just think it's not a good enough film.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. It is not good enough. And I think actually towards the end of the film, when things start getting very happy-dappy, things are coming back together, it really lost me. I thought this is... way too easy. I keep saying it's way too easy, but it is way too easy. It's just like the things start getting resolved very, very easily and quickly with these montages of training and working hard, and isn't it great? And I mean, I don't know if the film is like consciously parodying like boxing, like training montages, because that is the thing.
Yes.
The training montage. This is a boxing film, but the training is of a different sort and to a different end. Nonetheless, it's kind of done with this thrust of like he's getting back to normality, isn't it lovely? And also the music was really heavy-handed.
Yeah, the music was well, and to me that's another element. So the music was like pretty basic, and used heavy-handedly, and that combined with all of the other elements that I spoke of earlier. I mean, it does seem to me to be not much of a film, though quite a moving experience nonetheless. I mean, I'm sounding a bit contradictory in a way, right?
I know what you mean.
But I mean, it's an interesting film to see, and I would be very interested. I'm very interested in Paddy Considine as an actor, and I think I'm very interested in him as a writer. Actually, kind of as a filmmaker, I remain to be convinced.
No, I agree. It's interesting because I think sometimes I think of films as being films that I admire without loving. I talk about liking a film's technique or storytelling despite not having really been into it. And this, in a way, is the other way around.
Yes.
I don't think the filmmaking is very admirable, but there is a lot to like in the film.
Yes.
And I think it will probably stay with you a little bit.
Yes. Okay, well, I think that's kind of the way I feel as well, and that's a kind of a good verdict. If you don't have to travel for miles to see it, I would recommend.
No, sure, yeah. I mean, still glad we did because we got to see that nice cinema, and Nottingham's quite nice. And, it was an experience.
No, it was a nice day, and it was a nice experience to see it there. Yeah. However, the film was not...
It's not a film that is
the best part of the experience.
Now that we know that. But we went to the National Video Game Arcade.
Yes.
Which was great.
That was great, and the film was great, and we had cocktails, so a good day all around.
Well, let's just be clear. You had a cocktail, I had a mocktail, I was driving.
Right. Well,
just in case any police officers are listening.
Cocktails, mocktails.
It makes a difference.
You had a nice drink. All right, let's leave it here. We are on iTunes, Twitter, Facebook, eavesdropping@themovies.com. Do drop us a line. We love hearing from you, and actually, kind of, one of the reasons why we're doing this is a kind of a hope to engender a dialogue on these films. So please do feel free.
Yeah, actually, as I said at the start, one of the reason that we saw this, the reason I even knew about Journeyman, was because one of our listeners and a friend of mine, Bob, mentioned it. Let me just find where he told me about it. He said, if you and that fella, meaning you,
right,
haven't seen Journeyman yet, you should. And if it doesn't move you both to tears, then I'll eat my Twitter feed. Well, it didn't move me to tears. Did it move you to tears?
It deeply affected me. I didn't cry, but I welled up a bit.
I certainly felt some rumblings
yes.
at several points in the
yes.
film. But no point did I feel like I was going to burst.
No, if it's not cartoons, you rarely do.
It's basically, cartoons, dogs. I just want to, I can't cry. I can't love a human.
Need to get you a doll then.
A robot would be ideal. If a robot learns to feel love, I will cry my eyes out.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for
listening.
Okay. All right. Goodbye. The one thing I did want to mention, this occurred to me during the film, and when you talked about it being like a TV movie, it occurred to me that it felt like a long EastEnders episode to me at points, to the point where actually you kind of think at the end it would have a thing, like during the credits it would go, and if you've been affected by any of the issues in tonight's episode, we've got set up a free phone number. It had that bit of a feel to it.
Yes, which is not to its credit.
No, it's not. No.